Civil rights lawsuit is coming to South Bend. TYT is reporting exclusively this morning. This is in relation to the shooting death of a black man, Eric Logan, over the weekend, early Sunday morning in South Bend by South Bend police. I spoke this morning with the lawyer who represents members of Mr. Logan's family, and he gave me details about what the suit is about, the premise for the suit, why they're suing, and also shared with me that the suit is based, at least in part, on some of the reporting that we've done, and that TYT's audience has been supportive of over the last few months. So the suit itself is based on two specific elements. One is that they're going to be claiming, the suit will be filed on Friday in federal court. They're going to claim that Mr. Logan's civil rights were violated. He was denied due process during the confrontation with South Bend police officer Sergeant Ryan O'Neill, who ultimately shot and killed Mr. Logan. So that's one element, the denial of civil rights and due process in that encounter. The other is what's known as a Monell claim, and I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that what this means is that the suit will claim that the incident itself, the shooting, the denial of civil rights, arose from a systemic, sustained, what's called a pattern and practice of essentially turning a blind eye, looking the other way to civil rights violations, meaning that the neglect or the failure to address or properly correct, either through discipline, firing, termination, training, that there was not enough of those efforts to prevent systemic civil rights violations from occurring. In other words, the institution itself failed to create an environment that would appropriately protect the civil rights of the people with whom the police are dealing. And that's not just limited to the South Bend Police Department. That also includes the administration of Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who's been mayor since the beginning of 2012. And as we have been reporting, the police department, both before Mayor Buttigieg took office and since his tenure began, has had numerous issues with members of the police force, as well as allegations that these issues were not sufficiently well addressed. And I should point out that Mayor Buttigieg has taken concrete steps. The body cameras that police are supposed to be wearing were an initiative of the Buttigieg administration. There's been any number of measures, reform measures, that the Buttigieg administration has attempted to implement over the years. So the suit will apparently claim that those were either insufficient, ineffective, or were not carried out at all. It's very early to make that kind of prediction. But the other aspect that I want to make clear here about the lawsuit is that I asked the attorney, Brian Kaufman, and I'll tell you about a little bit more about him in a minute. I asked him about the monetary damages that they're expecting to seek, and he says, we don't know. Now, there's a certain floor that you have to seek to qualify for it being a federal case. At least that's my understanding. I could have that wrong. But his primary objective, at least it seems to me, to be to use the legal tools that come with a lawsuit, basically primarily subpoena power, the ability to compel testimony by people who otherwise wouldn't share things with you, to compel the release of evidence that the press, the media, and private citizens can't get. In other words, they'll now have the force of the courts behind them. And here's where it gets interesting. The documents and evidence that they'll be looking for will go well beyond the scope of the actual shooting, right? Because as I said, the Monell claim involves the entire systemic operations of the South Bend Police Force, as well as the institutional administration of it. So that could include the mayor's office. It could include the Board of Public Safety, which is appointed by Mayor Buttigieg. All of that is now potentially, if this suit goes through, is all potentially now subject to subpoena. So every single incident that you've seen us reporting about, every single incident that you've seen others reporting about, local media has chronicled any number of issues, lawsuits, complaints that have been made public over the years. All of that is now potentially open to subpoena power because it could all go to the question of whether or not there has been what's called a pattern and practice of turning a blind eye to civil rights violations. So I said before I wrap up and take your questions, I did say that I wanted to tell you a little bit about Brian Kaufman. So Brian Kaufman is actually not a stranger to South Bend. He's based in Chicago, and he's handled some high-profile cases there, but he's also practiced in South Bend. He knows South Bend. He knows the prosecutor there. So probably the most high-profile case he's been associated with was the case of Cedric Chapman. And I'm not super familiar with this case, so if I looked into it a little bit, obviously, and I know it was a big high-profile case, but if there are points that people think everyone should be aware of that I missed, please put them in the comments. I would ask you to do that. But the broad contours of it are simply that Cedric was a teenager, unarmed, who was shot in the back by police, and Brian Kaufman, Mr. Kaufman, the attorney now for the Logan family, spent 3 years battling with the Chicago administration to get the videotape of that released, and ultimately won what I believe was a $3 million settlement. So the getting the evidence out there is a big part of what this guy, Mr. Kaufman, has done in the past with other cases. And already, he told me, Kaufman's investigators have already been on the scene. He was contacted by the family on Monday, he told me, and he had investigators, at least one investigator, at the scene of the shooting on Tuesday, taking pictures, looking for evidence, checking to see whether there might be surveillance cameras that captured the shooting on video. As you may know, the shooting was not captured on the body cam videos of the Sergeant O'Neill, who actually committed the shooting. And at the moment, the prosecutor, city officials are saying there is no known video. So Kaufman's attorneys are there trying to see whether maybe that's not the case. So the suit is going to be filed Friday. Oh, and I should mention that Mr. Kaufman told me that the suit was based in part on some of the reporting that we did. So let me give you some details on that. One is something that's been pretty widely reported after the fact. We were the first to sort of give the specific details about where this information came from. But there were 2 lawsuits that were filed years ago that, as part of the evidentiary process, brought to light internal claims about O'Neill, that he had made disparaging remarks about black people, interracial couples, Muslims, Arab people. So those, we reported on those yesterday morning. And that's out there because, as I said, those are court documents, those have been floating around, and those are sort of broadly publicly known. But one specific thing that we have reported, because it came from a source who we did not name, who was a veteran of the South Bend Police Department, this source told me that they actually used to not work frequently with O'Neill, but did take a few calls with O'Neill and routinely saw O'Neill use force on people of color. 2 incidents in specific were described in the story that I did on this case, and that was cited by Mr. Kaufman as part of their basis for accusing the city, accusing O'Neill of, again, not just denial of civil rights in the shooting, but also systemic problems within the police force and the administration in terms of turning a blind eye. So with that, I'm going to see if you guys have any questions, and you can put them in the chat box. And as if I don't get to them now, I will ask you to put them in the comment box. Milo says, summarize for those who missed part. So Milo, I don't know if you're still listening, but I'm not sure which part you want me to summarize. But real quickly, again, Eric Logan was shot dead early Sunday morning in South Bend. He was a suspect in a string of suspected car break-ins that had been reported to police. Sergeant Ryan O'Neill apparently responded, saw Logan on the scene, confronted him, asked things like, is this your car? Is that your purse? And then, according to the prosecutor's account of O'Neill's account, Logan approached O'Neill with a knife and refused commands to drop the knife, refused commands to stop advancing. O'Neill fired 2 shots, one of which struck and ultimately killed Mr. Logan. So there's my summary. Kelly Wana says, this is not regarding the incident, but I want to know why Buttigieg hired this guy. He can't be wholly ignorant of this guy's history. Was it for money? Why was this man hired? So if we're talking about Ryan O'Neal has been on the force well before Mayor Buttigieg became mayor. O'Neal was promoted to sergeant, I believe, in 2015. That's not a decision that goes to the level of the mayor, as far as I'm aware. So Mayor Buttigieg would not have been involved in that. However, the chief, Scott Raskowski, who Buttigieg appointed, knew about at least one of the claims against O'Neal. Now, Raskowski later testified that that O'Neal passed a polygraph exam regarding the incident, and I should also say that a South Bend police spokesperson, said just this week that the claims about O'Neal's inappropriate remarks were not substantiated, not sustained following a South Bend police investigation. In other words, they weren't able to substantiate the claims against O'Neal. So that's what the police department has said. And I should add that we have yet to get comment to TYT in response to our questions from the police department, from Mayor Buttigieg. We also tried to reach the Fraternal Order of Police to try to get someone speaking on behalf of O'Neal and another officer whose conduct has come into question. Let me see. Hope that answers your question. If Mayor B cannot be a good mayor, what can be hope for president? That's Alma says. So that's not really within the scope of this story, Alma, but I'll weigh in with my opinion. I don't think we know. I mean, I think you can certainly make the case that you know these circumstances disqualify him, but I think you can also make a case that no one's ready to be president, right? That's a common refrain. No one is ready when they step into that office. And in some ways, they're never ready. Just because you experience it for a few years doesn't necessarily mean that any one person is fully up to the demands and the responsibilities. Some might say the outsized responsibilities, given how expansive the executive power has become, out of sync with what the founding fathers had envisioned. But I do think you can make the case that these are learning experiences, and people grow, politicians grow, politicians change. So I don't think it's, automatically disqualifying for what it's worth. Now I'm okay, Alma. It's just you and me apparently, so we're going to have a conversation. So you said that he must know what's happening in his own city. Yeah, I mean, he should be aware as mayor. That's pretty clear, and I think he would agree that he should be aware of what's happening in his own city. And again, this is not an issue that Mayor Buttigieg is ducking or has not addressed in the past, at least publicly, right? Publicly, he has spoken since literally being in office for just a few months because, right, he had that issue with the police tape. He has acknowledged, I think admirably acknowledged, that this is a hard task, right? This is a deep institution, right? It's a profound, the police department in any city of any size or of any significant size, that's a tough institution to make more than incremental changes, to make cultural changes. And he has acknowledged that. And you can certainly say, well, he's failed. You can have that opinion, but he hasn't pretended that it hasn't been a problem. He has spoken publicly. He has acknowledged his own shortcomings on this, which I think goes to his credit for what it's worth. So Nathan asks, is it confirmed that the individual approached him with a knife, or is that the officer's claim? So it depends, I suppose, what you mean by confirmed. The prosecutor said they did recover a knife. It appears that I spoke with family members who said he did not carry a knife. He did not have a knife on him. When he left, he was visiting with family Saturday evening and had been living with his mom and walked home early Sunday morning to go back to his mom's. That's the story the family told me. And they said, no, he did not have a knife on him. No, he did not carry a knife. The narrative that the prosecutor has advanced suggests that in the course of these car break-ins, a knife was stolen from one of the cars. And that knife is believed to be the same knife recovered at the scene. So it does appear that there is a knife. Whether or not Mr. Logan approached Sergeant O'Neill with the knife, or whether he threw the knife at O'Neill before O'Neill fired, which is what O'Neill appears to say on audio of his conversation with dispatch at the time, that's unclear. But the existence of a knife seems to be fairly well established, to the extent you're willing to trust the prosecutors and the police. And I think that's a fairly, I think it's fair to give them credit for that in this case, because now you've got multiple agencies, right? Because the prosecutor is actually an elected office. The prosecutor, Ken Cotter, oversees a unit called Metro County Homicide, if I have that correct. And they investigate these kinds of cases. Cotter, who oversees that unit, even though it's a police unit, he's an elected official. So he is separate and distinct from the South Bend Police Department. They're the ones who fire the shot in this case. So now you would have to have the prosecutor essentially vouching for the existence of a knife, which means the prosecutor, if the knife then magically disappears, the prosecutor is now basically being willing to be held culpable for that knife's disappearance. So if that happens, that's a really big deal, which of course tends to suggest that the prosecutor would not be likely to go along with that kind of scenario. So the short answer, too late, I know. The short answer would be knife seems to exist. What Logan did with it, that's an open question. What is the desired outcome from Buttigieg, says Nick Keith? Admit his failure and shortcomings? So the desired outcome depends on who's doing the desiring, right? There are South Bend residents, there are South Bend police, there's the family of Eric Logan, there's the family of Sergeant O'Neill, as well as Sergeant O'Neill himself. And of course, there are voters. So it's not for me to say what the desired outcome is. Clearly, in broad strokes, the desired outcome, in this case specifically, should be transparency and accountability in terms of what happened in this case specifically, and the way the department operates and has operated systemically over the years.